First things first, we got Antoine Walker back with us. All right, Twan, Sixers down in Miami, getting ready for game one of that series tonight. No Joel Embiid for Philly. He didn't even make the trip, still out with that orbital fracture and concussion. Sixers got a little good news yesterday. Looks like Embiid could possibly return to the lineup for game 3 or game 4. But why was Embiid even on the floor with game 6 out of reach? Doc Rivers was asked that yesterday. Take a listen.
The other team had all their guys in, too. The last 5 minutes of the game, we made the run the last minute of that game. Right before that, that's when we got up 29. After Joel made the shot and did the airplane, if you watch the game, I turned and said, I'm calling a timeout on the next possession. So, not upset that he was in. You can make that a big deal if you want. But just go and look at every team in every game, and their guys are in until about the 4 3-minute mark. That's what it is.
All right, Nick, you okay with Doc's justification there?
Yes, and I think we're being a little unfair to Doc Rivers here. Because, let's be honest, we were on the air, all the shows were on TV Friday, and before we found out Embiid got hurt, I didn't hear anybody on any show be like, by the way, why did Philly have their starters in late? That was a crazy, reckless decision by Doc Rivers. Nobody was saying that. And by the way, this caught everybody off guard. I can say with a high level of confidence that Philly, the team, left the game and into Friday morning, early afternoon, had no idea Joel was hurt. So they obviously knew before we did, but it's not like right after the game they're like, oh man, Embiid's going to be on the shelf for a week or two. Also, let me add this. I think people are slightly overreacting to this news in this regard, Antoine. I don't think Philly's dead at all. If Philly had home court and the 2 games Joel was going to miss were in Philly, that would be different. But Philly could go down 0-2 to Miami and still be relatively okay. And I think Philly can get a split if they play smart. If they keep DJ plastered to the bench, Doc, to his credit, played DeAndre Jordan 0 minutes in round 1. It's going to be harder to do that in round 2 without Embiid. But if they play small and have Tobias Harris be the center or let Paul Reed be the only center they actually play, I don't think it's impossible to get a split in Miami without Embiid. So I think Philly's okay here, and I don't blame Doc Rivers for having Joel Embiid in the game with 4.5 minutes left, which was their last offensive possession. I think that's totally fine. I do think it happens.
This is tough, and I have to agree with you, Nick. I'm not going to blame Doc for this. Doc is under a lot of pressure. It's a closeout game. You're trying to get out this series. Your history as a coach has not been well in teams coming back, and you just want to get out of there. You're trying to close out. Injuries happen. You never know what they're going to happen, no time or place. And I recall a situation in Chicago, and I saw Tibbs take a lot of heat when Derrick Rose stayed in the game too late, and he tore his ACL. And I saw a lot of people blame Tibbs for that situation. You just can't, it's tough when you're trying to close out playoff series and move on. And the reason, and that Doc looked defensive because you say, well, they had their best players in. Of course they got their best players in. They're down 20 points. Of course they're going to have their best players in. So I just think by him addressing it and the way he's addressing it and being so defensive, you can't control that. And I think we have to understand that. Now, it does put them in a situation, Nick, I disagree with you. They can't win this series now. James Harden is not playing good enough offensively for them to win this series. If he was in a great rhythm, he was scoring 25, 30 points a game. That's not what James Harden is at right now. He's not really taking a lot of shots. He hasn't been that efficient offensively. We saw a burst of energy, obviously, in Game 6 where he was getting to the basket, looked a little bit more athletic. So you're asking for a tall task from him that he's not in a good mood. You're not just going to turn it on against the Miami Heat. They're too good defensively. Eric Spoelstra's too good of a coach. They need Embiid to win this series. So it may have stopped them from advancing to the Eastern Conference Finals.
Wow.
I agree with that, Twine, because, look, I was leaning toward Miami even with Embiid fully healthy. But now I'm definitely picking Miami, unless they have injuries. Obviously, they've had some situations themselves. But right now, I like the Heat. But to Doc's point, I agree with you guys, and I even looked it up. But, I felt like, you often see starters in the game, even if it's a blowout with 4 minutes left, 3 minutes left, whatever it is. And I looked it up, game 4 of the Bucks series against Chicago. They're up 21, and Giannis and Drew Holiday get pulled out with 5:50 left. They're up 19 with 4 minutes left, and for some reason, those two go back in the game. I don't know if he felt 19 was too close. But then Golden State, same thing. They're up 23 in game 2 against Denver. They won by 20, and the starters were in until about 4:45 mark of that game. So I don't blame Doc for having Embiid in at that point. The problem with Doc is that he's fast and loose with the truth. Remember I said this about when he made the 3-1, he defended his record of blowing leads at 3-1. And he said the Pistons won the championship that year. Well, they didn't. They won it the next year, and they traded for Rasheed Wallace to boot. So it wasn't that championship team that you lost the lead to. Doc did the same thing here because he said, I was about to take him out. You see, I whistled for Joel. Maybe, but he left the rest of his starters in, James Harden, Tyrese Maxey, I think Tobias Harris. They stayed in until there was like 2:14 left. So was Doc really going to take Embiid out? I don't know. All right, and then when he said we just built the lead up to, in that last minute, they were up 21 to start the fourth quarter. They were up 26 with 8.5 minutes left, 27 with 6:49 left. So Doc doesn't help himself when he throws out these, I don't want to say facts, but these ideas that are just flat out wrong when he's defending himself. So if he's going to defend himself, he's got to make sure he's on point because it makes it look bad when you're defending yourself with flat out untruths.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Here's the other thing. It's a little bit like UFC when a guy gets knocked out and the guy still jumps on him. You're like, oh, my gosh. It's Nick Nurse's job to tap out. Like, if I'm Doc Rivers, like, are you done yet or no? Do I have to keep Embiid in here? We're up 29. There's 4 minutes left. Don't you want your standing ovation, Nick Nurse? Finally, Nick Nurse didn't want it. He's like, no, he's still playing hard. Siakam's in there throwing elbows. At first, I thought it was on purpose. It wasn't. But if the Raptors are playing hard, he probably has to stay in until Nick Nurse, tap out. I'm about to go to sleep. That's right. Here's the other thing. Just spinning forward, Nick. James Harden now. I know our guy, Daryl Morey, loves James Harden. It's going to write him a big check. The fact that the entire NBA is like, well, that's a wrap. Is James Harden worth all this money if we're just like going to throw our hands up that Embiid is out?
Yes.
And I know that he played better in the last game, if we can show the graphic there that Dusty made. But this is still, I still need more. This is my suggestion for James Harden. You can take a little page from Joe Burrow's book and Michael Jordan's book, Nick. Joe Burrow wears a little LSU wristband. You can look down and like, oh, yeah, I'm kind of LSU Joe Burrow. Michael Jordan used to wear his North Carolina shorts underneath his Bulls uniform. So here's the idea for Harden, Nick. Just go and get a small Rockets jersey, just a little tighter. Get it from Fanatics or you might have it in your closet and put it on and then put your Sixers jersey on over it. Because I need Houston Harden for these next two games. I need the guy that can score 28 points, can light it up, not the guy who's deferring, not the guy who's a complimentary piece of the Sixers future. I need MVP James Harden. And if I don't get him, then I don't know why Daryl Morey is justified giving this guy $200 million
Can I make a request? Hold on, can I just make a request?
Yeah, go for it.
We have spent more time talking about a potential contract James Harden might get this offseason than we've spent talking about the actual Sixers. They're still in the playoffs. Can we just focus on the Sixers playoff run before we start managing their books for the coming offseason? I understand the palace intrigue of the offseason is great, but the whole point is the playoffs. We're in the playoffs, so let's talk about the actual his actual play. I agree with you. He's going to need a great game for them to win one of these two without Embiid. I thought he was very good in Game 6, and the idea that James Harden, he had two amazing games right when he got to Philly. That was 8 weeks ago. So I do think it's possible. I think a Harden, Maxey, Harris, Tybal, and I'm leaving one guy out, a lineup for a five-man lineup absolutely can work for them. it can work for them from an offensive perspective. The question is, will they be able to get enough stops is really what's going to determine it. Listen, I don't think Philly's drawing dead at all, Jenna. I think Philly might end up coming back home for game 3 with the series 1 apiece, and Embiid coming back with a cool mask on. And I think they might be just fine.
That cool too.
All right, that series underway tonight. We'll talk about it tomorrow. We'll talk about some football right now. How should Mac Jones feel about the Patriots drafting another quarterback this weekend? K-Man's going to tell you next. First things first.